All right, folks, welcome back to Weaver's Wood Shop and to part 3 of the Shou Sugi Bond end table with a twist. And again, by now you know that the twist is the Cuban Mahogany inlay and the epoxy poured over the top. And what I've done now is I've already trimmed up the epoxy, and now I've got the 80 grit sandpaper on the sander, and I'm trying to sand it down to the final dimensions where it's flush to the side. The only problem with that is then I do end up hitting the side of the end table, the wood, and messing with epoxy, cutting it and sanding it, it does make quite a mess. As you can see there, I'm just kind of trying to clean off the work surface, and I'm just trying to feel it there and see what I got, see what I'm working with. So now I have switched from the 80 grit, and the 80 grit sandpaper that I have, just because it was given to me a long time ago. I have a lot of rolls of that 80 grit. It does not have the holes in it where my dust collection, which in my case is a shop vac, it cannot suck up the dust. That's one of the reasons that it causes so much dust. But now I've moved up to the 120 grit, and so that's what I'm doing here, trying to get that top ready for the last epoxy pour that we're going to do on the top. And no, I'm not really moving over it that fast. The video has been sped up, and so that's what I'm doing here, is I'm giving it one more pass with the 120 grit, getting everything ready, and then after the 120 we'll move up to the 220. And now you may be wondering, whoa, what are you doing? Why are you sanding down on the side of it? Well, if you'll remember, while I was trying to pour from the top, it was giving me quite a fight, and I did end up with some drips and some runs down on the side. So what I'm doing with this 120 grit is I am trying to clean up some of the runs and some of the drips that I did have along the sides, especially along those cedar round posts that I have in the sides. There were definitely some runs, and I'm just trying to clean up those epoxy runs there, so it's not something I have to worry about later. Yes, I'm going to end up having to burn it again to get that Shou Sugi Bond effect going back on it. And what I'm doing now, since I have to burn that wood again and it's right up underneath that epoxy, I'm seeing how flammable the epoxy is. I've never burnt or done this effect right up under that epoxy like that, and I had no clue how flammable epoxy was. So I picked up a piece of the epoxy that I trimmed off of there. I held the flame up to it just to see what was going to happen. If it was going to turn that charred color, I just wasn't sure. So that's what I was doing there, and I forgot to grab the rag, so I had to go grab the rag. I gave it quite a good workout here while I had to go ahead and give that Shou Sugi Bond effect to the wood, since I had to clean up that epoxy off of it. And I think, since you'll see there's a lot more actual flameage going on here, I think just with the chemicals from the epoxy, I do believe it is a lot more flammable than just the wood itself, because there was a lot more flames going on here while I was, giving it this last final burn. I would not include me taking a sip of water as part of the video, but what I'm really doing is keeping an eye. I got a smoldering piece of wood here that I can't get to stop smoldering, so I ended up taking a little bit of water and just pouring it on the shirt there, as you see, and I'm keeping an eye on this piece of wood. But again, that's part of Shou Sugi. I mean, it's just part of it. You are burning wood, and especially with the gaps and that kind of thing in there. Again, this is all scrap wood that started out different sizes and different lengths, and you got round pieces and square pieces and everything that had to make fit, and it does not fit perfect. So with all the spaces, you are getting air in there, and what does fire need to burn? It needs air. So I mean, it's getting everything it needs. So you know, this would definitely be an issue that you might have if you were to try something like this. So you know, again, this is something you can laugh at. You know, or cry about, or shake your head at, and say, "Wow, what an idiot this guy is." And once you show Shugi, yes, you've got to wire brush it. You've got to wipe it off with a rag. And here I am checking for level. I said, huh, almost. But I do have to use a couple of shims to get it level. Here I am using the shims. And we're just about ready to pour that epoxy. Now what I'm doing that I got everything level is we got to throw some tape up there and some plastic up there to keep the epoxy from running down onto the wood table, onto the Shou Sugi table, onto the burnt table, everything that you've worked so hard for, that I've worked so hard for. But anytime I tape something up, if there is an opportunity for me to throw a layer of tape underneath of, in this case, I'm going to be using plastic, underneath of that plastic that I'm going to be taping up there, I will, because that'll help prevent any mistakes that I might make if I don't quite tape everything up to the line, or in this case, right underneath that epoxy that I'm going to be, you know, taping up there. Now I'm cleaning off the epoxy, and again, I'm getting ready to mix up some epoxy and start pouring here. So now I think you can see why I like doing that first layer of tape underneath everything. You saw how I used the little pieces to hang that plastic up under there. Then I went back and I wrapped the whole other layer of tape around the plastic to help hang it up there. Again, I rarely have any holes where I get that overspray through there if I'm painting something, or where the epoxy runs through or whatever. And here I am pouring that epoxy. This is the last coat of epoxy that I end up putting on this table. And this is self-leveling, so once I get it all poured out, I go ahead, I use my 1/4" notches on my trowel, and I go ahead and I spread it out. And I will use my hand once I get it all spread out and get the whole top of the table wet. You can see the 1/4" notches right there. And I do it slow. I don't want to rush at anything. I want to be sure I have plenty of it on the top, because worst case scenario, I could always mix up a little bit more and just be sure that I go ahead and mix it up on the tabletop so I don't get anything funky. But I've got plenty on there. And I go ahead and I'm mixing it up. And you can see it running over the sides. That's exactly what you want for a tabletop like this. You want it to run over the sides. And then once I mix it all around and spread it out on the tabletop with my 1/4" trowel, I'll go ahead, and with the gloves on your hand, I would not suggest doing it without gloves. I just use my gloved hand and I just spread it around on the edges, and I spread it around, and then I go ahead and I take my torch and I torch it to get those bubbles out. I have never burnt any epoxy with a torch, but it's my understanding that you can if you hold it too long on it. I wasn't having any bubbles, so I didn't have to really worry about it. I've tried using a heat gun before. I feel like the epoxy starts moving with a heat gun, so I like a torch. I honestly, I should have come out earlier before it dried to pour the tape off, and I didn't. And that ended up causing issues. It causes issues if you wait for it to dry, because it's a pain in the butt, because the epoxy dries to the tape, and it's a pain in the butt to get the tape and everything off, and you just have to work at it for a long time without messing the finish of your table up. So here it is. It's all finished. The tape is all off. I'm just putting some wipe on poly on everything. Well, not on the epoxy, but on the wood, on the Shou Sugi bond. And here I am. I put, 2 coats of it on, put it all over it, and between the coats, I just followed the directions. The directions were to let it dry for 3 to 4 hours and come back and hit it with 220, a light sanding between coats, put another layer on, and that's what I did. So if you could do me a favor, and this video and my work or my mistakes have earned you a little bit of enjoyment and laugh, or maybe you've learned a little bit of something, if you could go ahead and hit that like and that subscribe and that little thumbs up button, and maybe share this video out, I would definitely appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, now you just saw the final sanding between the coats, and now here's the final coat of the poly, on this end table. And now you're getting ready to see what it looks like all said and done, and in the house, a little bit decorated up. They ended up putting a flower pot on it, and that flower pot looks pretty dang cool too. So thank you guys for watching another episode of Weaver's Wood Shop. See you next time.